on behalf of Cradley, our admin, and the entire mod crew, I want to thank you for your interest in the Pokemon Champions League. Guys, today what we're going to be doing is talking about all the rules of the PCL. I do want to note before we begin that everything I'm going to be talking about is in the rules doc. You can find that in the rules and resources tab in our Discord. You can also find it linked in the description below. If the answer to any particular question that you have is not answered in that document, it will probably be answered in the spreadsheet that is dedicated to this particular season. So, without further ado, we're going to be jumping straight into the basics. Now, most of you probably know what a competitive Pokemon Draft League system is. For those of you who don't, basically, it's a collection of a certain determined number of draft coaches, i.e. competitive Pokemon battlers, in a snake format drafts, the specifics of which I'll be talking about in just a moment. You choose Pokemon, draft Pokemon, whatever you want to call it, one by one until you have a roster of 11, plus a Z Crystal under the current main series games. That may be amended, of course, in later iterations of the Pokemon main series games where it either gets more complex or more basic, less complex. Who's to say what we hold in the future? But right now we have 11 Pokemon in your roster, plus a Z Crystal. Each week you choose, of course, 6 Pokemon you want to bring against your opponent's team, particularly in a detailed manner building against your opponent's team. And you go head-to-head in a 6v6 battle on Pokemon Showdown. So I do want to mention, we are a Pokemon Showdown League. Many leagues are 3DS leagues. This is easier for streaming. This is also more fun for those of us who like to watch the battles in real time and participate in the chat. We are a very large Discord server, and it is really fun jumping into the chat system and watching in real time. Each week you can find out who you're facing on Challenge. Challenge can be found in the Rules and Resources tab as well. And the winner each week will then upload and post their replay to the Draft Battle Records thread in the Draft League menu. That's basically all we do week to week. That is a bare bones version of what the Draft League is. Let's get into the structure of the league, how the regular season works, and of course, playoffs. So basically we have this, right? We've got the PCL, which is a conglomerate of 2 leagues, Origins League and Generations League. Each league has 16 participants. Those leagues are then broken down into conferences of 8 draft coaches. Those conferences are then broken down to divisions of 4. And in the regular season, let's say you're in the Pearl Division, in the Sinnoh Conference, in the Generations League, and the PCL overall. You face everyone in your conference or in your division twice, and then everyone in the other division within your conference once. So if you're in the Pearl Division, there are you and 3 other draft coaches, which makes 6 battles, right? 3 other coaches, you face each of them twice, and then 4 battlers in the Diamond Division, you face each of them once, adding 4 more to the existing 6. That makes a 10-week regular season because we battle once a week. Of course, then that means you have a win-loss record out of 10 by the end of the regular season. Then we have to determine then who goes to playoffs, right? So you may be wondering that. Basically, it looks like this. Let's say we're, again, in the Sinnoh Conference, Diamond and Pearl divisions, and we've got Tobias, who is undefeated, of course, Ash, Misty, and Brock. And then in the Pearl division, we've got Oak, Gary, James, and Jesse. If the records look like this at the end of the regular season, after 10 weeks, after 10 matches per draft coach, the top contender in each division will automatically go to the playoffs. Then we have 2 wildcard spots reserved for the next 2 best records. This is to make sure that, if one division is particularly stacked and just has the best players, we can control for that. So in this example here, actually Tobias and Oak, of course, are guaranteed. Ash and Gary then have the next best records in the conference as a whole, in the Sinnoh Conference as a whole, with 9 and 6 as their win record. But in this example, we have Tobias and Oak going as the top competitors, of course, again. But Ash and Misty actually have the best records with 9 and 6. I just swapped Misty and Gary. So as you can see, Gary did come in second place in the Pearl Division, but he's not going to the playoffs because Tobias and Oak are guaranteed. Ash and Misty are our wild cards. So that's the playoff system. Then we bring those 4 competitors per conference into a 4-person seeded bracket. Number 1, which in this case would be Tobias, plays number 4, which in this case would be Misty, and then numbers 2 and 3 play each other. That is Oak and Ash. It should also be noted, I'm just going off of the numbers, but head-to-head matters. So if, let's say, for instance, what's a good way? Let's say Misty beat Ash, right? And Oak beat Ash. So Oak is going to be above Ash because he won. If Misty beat Ash, despite the fact that Ash is going to the playoffs with that record, and his record is better than Misty's, Misty beat Ash. So Misty rests above Ash in the playoff seed. So the playoff seed would be Tobias, then Oak, who beat Ash, then Misty, who beat Ash, and then Ash, finally. This was implicated in the first season, and it matters because, you know, you want to know if you're playing Tobias in the first round as the 4th seed, like Ash is, or if you're playing against Misty or Oak in the first round, as Ash could have been. So, very important to understand the playoff system as a whole. Next, we're going to be jumping into the battle clauses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, guys. It's in the rule stock. Pretty typical competitive stuff. If you're familiar with Smogon, so sleep clause, you can only put 1 Pokemon to sleep at a time. Evasion clause, you know, no evasion boosting moves like minimize, double team, that sort of stuff. No accuracy lowering moves like what, Leaf Tornado, Mud Bomb, Mud Slap, that sort of stuff. You can look at all of that in the rules doc. I'm not going to spend too much time in this video on it. Look at the ban list as well. You can find the ban list in the rules doc. You can also find our ban list in the tier. So if you look at, so for instance, here's a good example. If you look at our, you know, this particular season's spreadsheet, you can see that there are tabs for the draft and tabs for the tiers. The only reason tiers is on here twice is because we update each draft's tier sheet per its draft, per its league, right? So we've got a Generations League draft, we've got a Generations League tier tab, so that you don't have to stare at the chart on the draft tab and figure out what's already been taken. We will update the tiers as we go within each league of the PCL. But you go into your tier tab, and if you go all the way to the right, you'll see a purple row. That is our ban list. It doesn't just have Pokemon, it also has moves and I think some items and some abilities and stuff, just in case you need to know. Again, as I mentioned, that's all in the rules doc. But even if you participated last season, you should look, because we do polls at the end of every season and tier shifts and things like that. For instance, in Season 1, Magearna was legal. I had it, brought it to the championship, put in a hell of a lot of work, but it is super stupid busted. So we voted to ban it, right? So it is now in that purple column. Make sure you check that out in the rules doc or in the tiers spreadsheet. Next, we're going to be moving on to drafting. So the way that this is done is you go into the draft picks thread in the draft league menu of Discord. You announce your pick, and then you ping who is ever next below you or on top of you, depending on which direction we're going in the draft. Whoever is next in the draft. So, you know, if I have my pick and then Cradley has the next pick, I say Zapdos, and then I ping Cradley right underneath that. And then she says, you know, Mew, and then she pings Clutch or whoever is right after her, you know. So we keep this going, and it's important to ping them right away just because we have an hour limit, 4-hour limit actually, on draft picks. The reason it's 4 hours and not something shorter is because we are an international draft system. We have people in Europe, the Middle East, Australia, I mean, of course, North America. We have people all over the world. So it is very difficult to, you know, force someone who might be on a different sleep cycle than you to choose within an hour. That said, please leave picks. I'm going to be talking about this in a little bit, but we want you to leave at least 3 picks per round and to leave 2 rounds. So every time you know you're going to be leaving and you're not going to be available for like an hour or more, make sure you leave 6 Pokemon, 3 for each round, with someone. So we're going to look at what a sample draft sheet looks like. This is the draft sheet from Season 1. Disregard the bolding and italics and colors and stuff. That had to do with trades and drops and things like that. But this is what it'll look like. And you'll notice there's Tier 1, Tier 2, 2 tier 3s, tier 4, tier 5, a mega, 4 free picks in purple there, and then a Z crystal. You draft these, exactly. This is what you draft in any order. There is no order to the draft. You can choose to, I mean, most people I think choose to draft OU in the first round. Last year we had someone draft a UU Pokemon first round because they were afraid that someone would take it and they really love using it. That's up to you. It is 100% up to you. The free pick system is a little difficult to understand, but basically think about it this way. You have 400 free points. So you have to pick one tier 1 in red, one tier 2 in orange, 2 tier 3s in yellow, a tier 4 in green, a tier 5 in whatever that greenish blue color is, the sort of seafoam, and then 1 mega there in blue. And then you have 4 free picks for which you have 400 points. And I have here, you can find this in the spreadsheet. Tier 1s are 180 points, tier 2s are 120 points, tier 3s are 80, tier 4s are 40, and tier 5s are 20. So with 400 points, you can take, for instance, a tier 1, a tier 5, a tier 2, and a tier 3, right? That makes 80, or 180 plus 20 is 200, plus 120 is 320, plus 80 more is 400. There's your 400 points. You know, you've got everything taken care of. There is a way to increase your points above 400, and that is with Mega Pokemon. So, if you pick a Tier 1 Mega in red, those are super, super overpowered Megas. Those are great picks. I recommend taking a Tier 1 Mega, but if you'd rather spread your team and make it more balanced, maybe you take a Tier 2, Tier 3, even Tier 4. I'd love to see someone take a Tier 4 and gain 80 points. That would be super exciting. But yeah, I mean, Tier 1 Megas don't give you any more points, so you just have 400 to begin with. If you pick a Tier 2 Mega, you gain 40 points. So now you don't have 400 points for your free picks, you have 440. Sorry guys, I know I'm belaboring the point, but the point system can be very difficult sometimes, no pun intended. And I want to make sure you guys all understand this. Tier 3 Megas grant you, was that 60 points, Tier 4 Megas grant you 80 points. Make sure though, this is very important, make sure as you're drafting that you don't corner yourself into drafting a low tier Mega if you don't want one. So people do this all the time where they say, oh, I've got all these free picks, you know, I've got 4 free picks here, and I'm going to take 2 OU Pokemon. Okay, 2 OU Pokemon is 180 points and 180 points. That's 360, which means for your last 2 picks, you only have 40 points, which is okay. There are some really good tier 5s, and you can do 2 tier 5s. But then you forget about that. You pick a tier 4, and you have 0 points left for your last free pick. You have to pick something, and because you have to pick something, you're going to go over your 400 points, which means you're going to have to take a Mega that gives you more points to cover for that. At the end of the draft, you have to have, you don't have to use all 400 of your points, but you probably should. Some people didn't last year, and then eventually they did free agency transactions to make it work. You have to not go over your 400 points. That is very important. Please, please stay accountable for yourself on that, because if you do make the mistake of going over, people are going to be upset about it because maybe you sniped something that they would have otherwise wanted, and then we're going to have to go back and determine whether they would have been sniped, and it just becomes very difficult. Just please stay accountable of that. And I mentioned this before. Please leave picks. So let's say round 1 you've already picked. Let's say you're the 3rd pick in the round, right? And round 1 is over. We're about to get to number 16 and come back up the draft, and it's 11 o'clock midnight for you, and you can't stay up anymore, of course, certainly not long enough for it to come back to you at pick number 3. So you know, you private message a buddy of yours and you say, hey, if it comes back to me, I want Suicune, Volcanion, or Mantine, right? And then if it comes back to me again in round 3, I'm prioritizing fighting types. I want Mega Lopunny, Infernape, or Breloom. I want something that's a fast or with priority fighting type. This is important because if you, for instance, only gave me the left side here and just gave me Suicune, Volcanion, or Mantine, I would be stuck in this awkward position. Let's say you get Suicune. Great. and then it comes back to you because the third pick just goes to 2 and then 1 and then 1 and then 2 and back to you immediately. And now all I have is Volcanion and Mantine. Bulky water types are great, but I don't necessarily think you want 2 of them. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. Maybe you do really want a fighting type and you just neglected to tell me. Then I either have to take Volcanion for you or use my judgment and choose something, which I probably wouldn't do, or just not pick. And then we're all sitting around waiting for you while you sleep, which is fine if you leave your picks. So please leave a minimum of 2 rounds of picks. I know it can be very difficult to know whether you'll get sniped. It can be very difficult to know whether you want to draft any particular thing. Keep an eye on what synergizes with what you've already picked, and just please try to be here if possible. That's all I'm saying. All right. Throughout the season, there's free agency transactions. You get a total of 5 free agency transactions throughout the season. And for those of you who don't know, a free agency transaction is basically you take a Pokemon on your roster and you swap it with something that isn't on someone else's team, that's still sitting in the tier spreadsheet. That's why we bifurcate the tiers for you. It's still sitting there available as a free agent, right? You get 5 total in the season, and you can't do a free agency transaction until after week 1. So you can't just draft and then immediately do a free agent transaction. That's just not how it works, right? You are locked into that week 1. After your first battle, after week 1, and that is after Sunday at 0:00 a.m. Pacific time, then you can start doing your free agency transactions. I recommend, however, that you hold on to free agency transactions until later in the season when you think you start realizing what your team actually needs. It's really, really, really damning if you run out of your free agency transactions way too early. Okay. It should be noted that you can do more than one at a time. So I don't have an image for this, but you know what? I can bring up the points again. So let's say you're working in like your free picks or something, right? And you have a tier 1 and a tier 5. And you want to drop your tier 1 and your tier 5 for a tier 2 and a tier 3. Note that tier 1 and tier 5 makes 200 points. Tier 2 and tier 3 makes 200 points. You can drop tier 1 and 5 together and pick up tier 2 and 3. This becomes really awkward just because you can't technically drop a tier 5 and pick up a tier 3. But you can do it if you do all the drops and adds at the same time. Do note, though, that this counts as 2 free agency transactions. Now you only have 3 left in the season. So this can be beneficial for increasing diversity on your team or maybe becoming more balanced. However, please keep in mind that you have a limited number of these throughout the season. Typically, if you're only doing 1 then, you have to stay within the tier. So if I'm going to drop a tier 1, that means I'm picking up a tier 1. Also note, you cannot free agency transaction with your Mega. You can trade between teams with your Mega, but like if I have Mega Lopunny and I see Mega Charizard X there and I think that would be better for my team, I can't do a free agency transaction. The reason for this is because the points become very awkward and confusing. So be careful when you're drafting your Mega because you are locked into it. Alright, we are going to talk now about... Oh, you know what? Actually, this is something I do want to mention. So I brought up a sample sheet like this, right? And you see at the right, there's Z crystals. Just to the right of that, you're going to see this. It's an add drop portion on the spreadsheet. And you can see some people were diligent about it and other people maybe not so much. But I was in the 3rd row. Take a look at what I did. So in week 2, I dropped for Alligator, picked up Electros, and I dropped Rotom Mow and picked up Superior. That's a 2-tiered transaction like I just mentioned. I don't remember exactly what these tiers were, but they worked out so the points were correct. And I designated it as week 2. In week 4, I dropped Latias and picked up apparently Drawdont, not Crawdont. I dropped Jellicent and I picked up Mismagius. In week 6, I dropped Rocky MZ, picked up Fairy MZ. And Also in week 6, this is where you designate trades as well. I traded Donphan and Bulu for Victini and Roserade with a good friend of mine, Hassan. So that's where you're going to want to designate them. That's really beneficial for those of us who, need to keep up with the transactions. If we just look at the draft sheet when we prep for your team and we don't see any transactions there, we're going to assume that that's your existing team, and we're going to prep for something that's totally wrong, like that you don't have anymore. And that's happened to people. That happened to people last season. Please just keep up to date on your on that. The last thing then, well, I guess we could talk about trades for a moment. I don't have any images for this, but you can trade with anyone within your conference. So within your conference. So I'll bring this up again. Let's say I'm in the Pearl division, and a buddy of mine is in the Diamond division, and we want to conduct a trade. That's fine, right? Because we're both in the Sinnoh conference. If I'm in the Pearl division and my friend's in the Sapphire division, I'm in Sinnoh, he's in Hoenn, we can't conduct a trade. That's just the way that it goes. So, that's a little difficult. Trades are relatively rare anyway, so I don't think it's super concerning. The other thing I want to mention is you announce trades in the draft pick section. So in not draft battle records, picks. Where is it? Here. In the draft league menu in the draft picks, exactly where we conducted the draft, right? So you announce trades there. I believe we have some rules that you may have to confer with Cradley about, possibly a veto system. I've never seen the veto system done. Just, honor code, just do good trades. Don't trade something ridiculous. And it also should be noted, you cannot conduct a trade with a player who is already disqualified from the playoffs. If their record is so bad that they're not going to make it into the playoffs, or if it's the last week of the season and they're disqualified, you can't conduct that trade. We are implementing that rule this season just in case someone, is kind of violating their personal honor code or the league honor code, and they're trying to give someone a huge, bulky benefit of a team to scratch their back. I mean, just what the rules should be. Follow what the rules should be. Okay, let's see. I'll also note there should be no trades during playoffs at all. So trades are locked as soon as a player is disqualified from the playoffs, and once the playoffs begin, there are no trades. And as I may have mentioned before, megas can't be free agency transaction, but megas can be traded. Rosters then are adjusted. If you do a free agency transaction or a trade, that doesn't actually come into effect until 0 a.m., so midnight. It's midnight Saturday night, so Sunday at 0 a.m. Pacific time. Pacific time. Make sure you know that. And make sure you know that means, for instance, if you live in California, that means Saturday at midnight in California. That's when it turns over. Not Sunday at midnight, because most of us don't stay up until midnight on Sunday night. We do, however, stay up until midnight on Saturday night, probably playing Pokemon. So that's when it turns over. If you want to have something for the following week, make sure you make that trade or free agency transaction before Sunday at 0 a.m. Pacific time. Okay? And you cannot pick up anything that you once had on your team. So if you traded something off of your team, if you dropped it in a free agency transaction, you can't pick it back up. That's not how this works. The last thing I want to mention is actually really, really important. I'm saving the best for last in a way. And this is the spreadsheet. So this is an example of my spreadsheet for the Chicago Chimecos last year for Season 1. It's kind of hard to see, I know, because there's a lot going on in it. I did a team picture, and I did little icons, and I did sprites, and I did everything. It's super helpful to put the stats of the Pokemon that are on your team right there, so that if I'm building for your team, I can, take a look at your speed tiers, I can take a look at your defenses, and I can do damage calculations a little bit easier. But this is generally the information you want to have in your spreadsheet. You have to update every week on your differential. I'm noticing even right now, I didn't put my differential at the top right there in the blue box for week 7. it's hard to stay diligent on these, but please do as much as possible. You'll also notice I have a spot for dropped Pokemon. I have two spots there for traded Pokemon. And I have a kill-death ratio for every single Pokemon. The reason this is super important is because we do have an MVP in the league. I'm not 100% sure. I think our MVP in the league last year in the regular season was my Snorlax. The MVP in the league overall may have been Scolipede after playoffs, or it may have been Gastrodon. I'm not 100% sure. But you keep track of that so that we do have an MVP. And honestly, guys, that's about it. I do want to reiterate again, most of what I talked about is in the rules doc, and if it's not, it's in the spreadsheet for this season. I'm sorry for making a rules video that was 26 minutes long. Again, I want to thank you guys for your interest in the PCL. I know this is a very complex league, but it is a lot of fun. It is a really, really good group. I'm glad you want to become a part of our community. It's a super supportive bunch. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Hit me up, any of the mods or Cradley, and we can reiterate some things for you. I hope you guys have fun if you do join the draft league, and if you don't, remember we do have a gym league that we still have running sort of in the backdrop as well. All right, I guess that's about it. I will catch you guys later. Peace.